Okay. I'm going to hit record and I'm going to hit the video.
Okay.
And welcome to the broadcast.
Yeah. One more
brilliant.
small step towards
Yes.
professionalism.
We have new toys.
We have new toys.
We have new toys. So our newest toy is StreamYard. So we'll be able to do some more stuff soon.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, this should be interesting.
Yes.
We have plans.
Observe the cunning plots occurring right there next to me. So, yeah, we have plans. So,
Fun plans.
yeah, we can actually have people come and join us. So we can have. I'd like to have the feral ladies come join us. All three of them.
Yes. Oh
So-
my God. Yes.
Yes, that
I
would
would
be
love to
so
have
much
the feral
fun.
ladies.
Yes, that would be
And we have a guest that we had invited a while back, and now I can reach out and be like, so let's set a date.
Mm-hmm.
So,
There's a couple of those.
yes.
Absolutely.
Oh, you know what? Okay, so since we can do guests, just a fair heads up warning, we really should have Mike and Nick on.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yes, we should.
We have intern Steve, and now we have an official Raconteur Press nanny.
High
And
class muscle.
and Booth Babe.
And Booth Babe.
And Booth Babe.
Yeah.
So, all in one package. So,
I have threatened to throw him in a bikini. So, we'll see how that works.
now we can put it in a mankini.
You too.
I would not argue.
I'm thinking kilt and yeah.
Well, yeah, kill would be better.
Oh,
So,
the kilt's just kind of everyday wear. This is for
Special occasions.
special occasions.
no.
Oh.
It's been a day of very interesting changes and people learning about standing still next to us. So
Which is kind of what he did.
yeah.
He showed up, we put him to work. This is what we do.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, here poor James Young came to dinner with us at LTE, and now look what he's stuck with. So,
This is so much fun, but I have to work on my own projects, guys.
that we don't.
That-
I mean, what are you
we
talking
know-
about?
We know nothing about that conundrum.
Not at all.
Oh man. Yeah.
We're absolutely terrible to that man. It's wonderful.
I don't hear him complaining.
I don't either.
Yes.
So that's a good sign.
Yeah, he's adorable. Yeah, I don't know that we had any specific plan for today, other than hi, here we are.
All three of us.
All three,
All three of us
we're
in the
all
same spot.
three in the same spot. We're back in our
Yes.
chairs. Here we
Yes.
are.
I've missed my chair.
Yes,
I'll be honest.
complete with our props and our
I just missed this. I
Yeah.
mean, the class I was taking was amazing and intense and wow. But also extremely I wasn't doing anything else for a while. I was just kind of wrapped up in
we're studying assholes for a month.
they're not all assholes. Bass is cute. It's a little round wasp.
I don't know. I think they're wasps or hornets. I mean, it's like bees, bumblebees, assholes. That's all they're. But
They're all Hymenopterous, so technically they're all wasps.
okay,
Ants, bees, wasps, all one giant.
okay, but sort of like people. They're
Uh-huh.
large and contain multitudes.
Yes, they
Right.
do. They do.
And some of them just happen to be assholes.
Right.
So
Yes.
placement on the whole scale.
Well,
So-
and the funny thing is, of wasps, and leaving aside bees and ants because they are their own thing, of wasps, only a tiny portion of them are the kind that can sting, the aculeata, and they're the assholes.
Mhm.
Everything else is okay.
So what you're saying is there's just bad apples in the bunch
Yes.
who give everybody else a bad name.
Well, I mean, when you think about the fact that most wasps are parasitoids, and a parasitoid, to separate it from a parasite, is one that kills its host. So most wasps are assholes, yes.
Oh, okay.
They're the ones that create zombies to lay their eggs in. And
Yes.
Yes.
They can either be idiobionts or coinobionts. And idiobionts are actually the nicer ones because they paralyze the host and lay eggs on them, and then the larva eats them while they're still alive. But we don't think they can feel much. Coinobionts, on the other hand, they lay their eggs on them or in them, and then the host goes about doing its thing, well, the larva grows until, well, we know how that ends.
Yes.
They make really fantastic models for alien science fiction creatures,
Mm-hmm.
which I have to say, Dave Freer, who's an ichthyologist by trade and also a brilliant science fiction and fantasy author, when I first read Rats, Bats, and Vats,
Oh.
and as soon as I hit the alien bad guys, I knew exactly what the model was. And I had to stop and just chortle for a couple of minutes because I knew exactly what he'd modeled his alien bad guys on. And it's obscure, but I was interested in marine biology as a kid, so I knew what that was. And you'll have to go read it now if you want to find out.
Yep. It's been a minute, but yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But it is a great way if you study some of the more obscure, and particularly when we're talking about invertebrate, because vertebrate biology tends to be, not always, but tends to be more or less fairly predictable model that we're all familiar with.
Uh-huh.
Invertebrate biology, all bets are off. There's some weird, bizarre stuff out there.
Bugs.
Oh yeah.
Bugs are like,
Well, not just bugs. I mean,
I know.
Things like crabs and sea anemones and yeah.
Odd things in the deep, dark sea.
Oh, you're very odd things in the deep, dark sea,
Yeah.
including snails.
Where did your brain go?
tentacles? Because it's Taco Tuesday.
Tentacle. Well, okay, so not to digress, but she wandered in the other. What was it? Yes, it was Sunday. Sunday, I was like, I'm just not going anywhere. I decided to stay home and do nothing, right? Which I still did some work, but she walks and she peeks around my door and she says, I am going to go get donuts. And I went, oh, that sounds lovely. And I was like, and I'm not leaving my bed. And she's, then I have to write my Tuesday, Taco Tuesday story. I went, oh, donuts, tentacles, holes, conveniently. So you can have a donut tentacle Taco Tuesday thing. Can you make tacos out of donuts?
I haven't quite managed tacos yet, but there are donuts and there are tentacles.
I'm such an instigator.
Well, okay, so my Taco Tuesday, I'm kind of.
You could preview your Taco Tuesdays too.
I'm well, yeah, and
because people will have read them because you'll post them.
That's true. They'll be posted by the time this goes live.
Oh, your brain is off in its own place, Cedar.
Wait, taco tentacles, right?
Well, no, actually, I'm trying to figure out how to make tacos out of
donuts. Right?
Yes.
I haven't quite managed that yet.
How do you keep? I mean, if you can fold them in half, but everything drips out the middle.
Right. Exactly.
Like,
that's the problem. Unless you do something more like epoxy.
Or you could plug it with the tentacle.
Like you could do like
plug the hole with the tentacle. You can have calamari donuts.
You can have donuts that have
tacos.
filling in them.
Yes.
And a tentacle.
So I'm thinking like one
cream filling and a tentacle.
Yeah, cream filling and a tentacle.
This is going all kinds of wrong.
Exactly.
We remind you, this broadcast is not
safe for husbands, children,
whatever.
Yes.
So yes, what are you doing?
My Taco Tuesday has octopus in it. Octopi, octopuses. I'm calling them octopuses because that's actually grammatically correct.
Okay.
And they have miniature octopuses which have been discovered and blah blah blah.
Okay.
Like pets.
There's a world in a donut hole.
Oh my! Well, so like I posted like the first 500 words or whatever I did the story.
I think I saw that.
Yeah, and it was the she comes and yells at her for eating half of the donuts.
Yes,
in the break room.
Saw that.
And she's like, I didn't eat half. Like, why would you think I would eat half a dozen donuts? She's like, no. Someone went in and ate half of every donut in the break room. I'm like,
they just wanted to make little bridges, as opposed to just aimless holes.
Because I'm like, if I'm starting with donuts, start with donuts. Make it like a fight, which is so much fun.
Happy little donut rainbow.
They had donut rainbows at Voodoo Donuts, but that was a whole different thing. So
darn it, I don't think I have any of my rainbow cakes anymore.
Oh,
little paints set up so that there was. You took the flat brush.
Yeah.
You got everything loaded. I used them for face painting and all kinds of different cakes that did different patterns.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty sure because all my face paints are long gone. I haven't done that for years. But I used to have more than one rainbow. I had like pastel and bright and neon. Because rainbows are always popular.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Guess they are.
So, but I'm using some of my Taco Tuesday to do backstories on some of my characters.
Oh, fun.
And to kind of soft launch other alien species.
Yeah.
To see, like, okay, do people like want me to pursue this?
You're you're playing.
I am
in some interesting areas.
So so this one has tentacles.
And actually, because it's funny, because there's conversation that happened in the Discord. So we've been doing the art challenges with MidJourney, which has been a lot of fun because we're exploring. It's cool because it's kind of like art history appreciation, because we're exploring a ton of different artists that, I mean, the majority of them I had never heard of before. And we've got one very special lady that I'm not going to name because does a pen name. But you know who I'm talking about. She's helping and running a lot of this.
Yeah, she's
I think it's stress relief for her. So
yes.
she's gone out and she's found all of these artists that are in the public domain, and then we have prompt words and the artist, and we run the prompts through MidJourney, and we can tweak it. But the other day, the prompt didn't have mermaids in it, but a bunch of us enjoy doing mermaid art because MidJourney sucks at it.
So you never know what you're going to get.
Wait, you never know what you're going to get. And so I had done something the other day and had wound up with, as someone pointed out, it's an eel lady. And I'm like, okay.
Okay, so instead of a scaly fin, it was
black and dark and shiny, but and very long.
It's not
and
generally
curvy.
been a lady in my experience, but okay.
We're talking about a figure from mid chest down, and then it just kept like going down.
And it
So
does.
very
But
eel.
anyway.
But so then we got into a conversation about biology and whether mermaids were going to have live birth, viviparous, or if they were going to be egg bearers. And
that's always a question with mermaids, isn't it? Because it's like, is something hiding behind the scale somewhere? So
and the thing is that there are fish that are live bearers.
Yes.
And there are fish that are fish layers. And there are mammals. Most mammals are live bearers, but there are 2 mammals that lay eggs. So we decided that it could go either way.
Right. Yeah.
Right. We decided it could go either way. And then someone had said that it would make more sense for a mermaid to be kind of shaped like an octopus on the bottom half.
Yeah, it would.
Which, I mean, my first thought was villain from Disney's Little Mermaid.
Ursula.
I'm like, I wanted to say
Ursula.
Vernon. Why the heck I wanted to say Vernon? I don't know, but that's not it. So Ursula. And so that was my first thought. And then I'm like, no, not really. But so then I was poking MidJourney to see if I could get it to give me a lady. A lady that was octopus on the bottom half. And I got it.
Or squid.
Yes. Well, I got octopus.
Okay.
And a dress, but it's MidJourney. It's a prude.
No naked mermaids.
Well, MidJourney
I have gotten naked mermaids in the past, but MidJourney has actually gotten it so that because it used to be that if you were generating older art, because there's a lot of artistic nudes in the world, and you would get that. MidJourney has cleaned up their algorithms, so you don't get that anymore.
No.
Although sometimes you'll get really bizarre stuff that's like Barbie doll, if you know what I mean. Which I'm just like, that ain't right. I'd rather it was all there. But so I have an image, and I was trying to write 50 words to go with that because I'm taking a low-key Taco Tuesday. So I have my tentacles and my lady. I just have to write. I wrote a story that I'm not happy with. I'm going to write another one, I think. Because I always think when I write 50-word stories, what would Jonna say about this one?
Is it a whole story? Yeah.
Exactly.
Is it a complete story?
Did you read
Yes.
Mike's,
so
Mike
Yes,
Burke wrote his
that was
his
brilliant.
Substack article about,
Mhm.
is it complete? Which is like, nope. He's like, nope, no, it's not. Nope.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that's why I didn't make it.
Well,
There you go.
and he took, I think it was the first iteration.
Yeah.
He actually took and
And
expanded
made the story. Yeah.
and made it into
That's
steampunk
what I kept
story.
saying. So many of our postcards were
Mhm.
beginnings of great stories, but they weren't
Right.
complete stories.
And,
Right.
and that's the one that's in Full Steam Ahead, which
Yep.
is
Yeah,
And
which
it's
just
excellent
came
story.
out.
yeah,
Which
So-
just came out and went rocketing to number one,
And
which
has
was
stayed there.
and stayed up there in the top,
Mhm.
1 to 5. It's just that wow.
and we're bouncing back and forth and sharing the top number 1 spot.
Well, I mean, it's Mr. Campbell. I mean, hello, right?
And,
So
and Cedar's too.
and Cedar's up there too.
Yeah, which I didn't expect. I mean, science fiction anthologies isn't a category that you can put yourself in on the back end.
Well, it is. But how we got there, it's science fiction anthologies and short stories.
Yeah.
I didn't pick any of that. Amazon picked it for me because those are short stories, and I
Mhm.
had tried to get them in romance categories, which they are. And I mean, I've been holding number 1 new release in 45-minute romance short reads for the last couple of weeks now.
Yeah.
Which
Darn.
no, that I had done on
Fabulous.
purpose.
Yes.
No, it's fantastic, especially when I look at what else is there. I'm amused because what I'm doing is not traditional romance. I'm trying to hit the romance beats. Reviews seem to indicate that I'm doing that, although the last one of the reviews says that the romance takes a back seat, but then they're not unhappy with it because it's the last of a trilogy arc.
Mhm.
So I spent most of the story in that one finishing up the arc.
Yeah,
Mhm.
tightening everything
overall
up.
arc.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the romance was kind of backseat to the finishing that
Mhm.
story arc. But the feedback that I saw on Steampunk that was really kind of cool was Jim shared it on his blog with a couple. He did one of his little promo posts, and the first comment under it was for the Steampunk anthology was that cover looks like fun, which is exactly what we want to see.
Yes.
Because then they're like, well, this cover looks like fun. Let's go see if the stories are fun.
Well, and we set the frame for that when we did the broadcast on that one. Is what we were looking for.
Yeah,
Positive, forward-thinking, adventure, fun. And clearly when you generated that amazing cover.
Well, and that's the thing too, because you and I bounced back and forth on doing the cover for that, because with Steampunk, I was initially thinking I would go with more of a Victorian era graphic design cover with like swirls and ornate symbols and stuff and the text, but that's a very static cover. I mean, it's beautiful, but it's static. And I think that ultimately you steering me in the direction of
adventure.
Let's do this kind of action scene.
It has more of a weird kind of steampunk spaceport feel to it, which is where we were kind of going anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
And we have at least 2 stories that have spaceships in them.
Yeah.
There might be 3.
I think there's 3.
Yeah.
But 2, it's also that it harkens back to that era of exploring the Great West kind of feel at the same time, combined with the space exploration. It's just, it had a complete universe feel about it, which too often I think a lot of the steampunk stuff looks too shiny and new.
Yeah.
And if you spend any time around Steam, shiny and new doesn't last very long.
Well, and I wanted to evoke an old oil painting.
Yeah.
With that art too. Which is the other fun thing about learning how to tweak MidJourney and get what I want out of it is I can get pretty much any style I want from very sleek postmodern to the great thing about this challenge in January has been exploring all of these different art styles for things like getting stuff that's got brush strokes obviously in it and stuff that evokes old movie posters.
So what you're doing is how dare you do an art school project of exploring styles?
Yes,
with a tool that's used for art. What an idea! Huh? Sorry, having a moment.
No, absolutely. But this is one of many things that I've actually used MidJourney for.
Yeah,
was I used it in teaching my son art history.
Yes,
it was
excellent
a fun we played a little game where we would look up different artists, and we would run silly prompts through MidJourney in their style, and then compare it with the artist's style. But what it was it got my son, who's totally uninterested in art. I mean, had I tried to make him take an art class, he would have fought me the whole way.
Yeah.
But by having the game ability of using MidJourney in there and letting him make up the silly prompts, he was all in and had a blast with.
Well, yeah, and you can learn the descriptive terms that lead to that particular kind of thing. So
learning some art terms there and different artists, and so it's one of those things and that also helped me when I was first playing with it, because it's not as easy as just plug and chug.
No, it is not. No, but I do love that. I love that. It's so much of art and how we see the world is just ingrained in our world vision. We aren't aware of it. There's a wonderful book about dress in Hollywood history, where they do historical dramas and you can guess what the decade was that they were doing it in, because they cannot get away from what exists in their subtext and how they see the world.
Yeah.
I mean, you can spot a 50s historical drama from clear across the room.
Oh yeah.
Even if it's Cleopatra, because the bras are all pointy, I mean, it's like, the bust lines are all pointy and the shape of the women's body is all so geared to that time frame. So it's incredibly, we key into those things on book covers in a way that most people don't realize. And people may not realize, wow, it's sort of like Cedar planned it that way. So
and the constant part of the issues I was having with writing some historical romances I was trying to write, because I was trying to do some historical paranormal, and I would look for Victorian, and I would get Elizabethan, and I would get medieval, and I would get badly done.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And unless I wanted to go for full on reenactment photos, which cost the moon.
Yeah.
Or pay someone who knows again, paying
know your silhouettes. I know your silhouettes.
It's like I could not, which is why a lot of things like the Regency romances and other stuff have the completely wrong dress.
Oh my God! Don't even get me started. So
actually, I think of the most effective covers up until recently, with the advent of the AI art, the most effective covers for a Regency were largely
abstract,
not abstract silhouettes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
because you could pick up the shape. Yeah.
Very graphic design, very greeting card like.
Yeah.
Because you could do the shape, and there's a lot of clip art out there that's more or less correct.
Dover books are your friends.
Yes.
So.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that was actually the most effective, and I know that there was a lot of traditional publishers that went that route with Regencies. In fact, it was one of those giveaway styles when we've done romance cover things before.
Yeah,
we should do that again.
Yeah, that would be fun. We should have the boys do Western.
Yes,
because Western has some very specific hits. To
should ask Amy to put together random bags for them.
A random bag of Western covers. That would be fun.
Yeah. Also, what we should do is we should go to the fringes of Wichita Falls Library, that warehouse.
Yes, we found out there's a warehouse of the Friends of the Library warehouse bookstore in Wichita Falls that we did not know about.
So
it's like, and the books are, it's like, careful, Jonna.
We're not going to rescue books.
No,
we're going to
we're going to go research books. So, but there's going to be this bookstore. Anyway, one thing at a time.
So I was like, I went to Alley Cat, and what did I come home with from Alley Cat? Books and deviled eggs dishes, but books, including.
That's a terrible thing. Sitting with a book and a plate full of deviled eggs. That sounds terrible.
They're super handy to have, though.
Yes, I can totally help you get rid of those. So. The deviled eggs, not the dishes. So
Well, one of the books that I picked up there is an Edgar Rice Burroughs called The War Chief, which I had not read, and from the blurb, it's basically Tarzan but set in the Old West with Indians instead of monkeys, which is a whole. I don't think he did that on purpose. It's probably not quite as racist as that just sounded. Sorry, but the plot line is basically similar of baby raised by culture not his own.
Yeah.
And I had never seen it before, so this one was a new one to me, and I picked it up for $10, which was really reasonable.
Yeah.
But I always get in trouble when I wander around an alley cat because it's a big antique mall.
It's a warehouse. It used to be a production warehouse, and it's like each floor is like enormous. It's enormous. It's like a city block.
And I get lost.
Yeah, and they keep adding more, and it's just like
they've closed down a couple of the stairs now. So
Yeah, because those were scary.
Yeah,
there
were
some
scary
really
stairs.
scary. Yeah, and
So
I was like, can I just use the elevator? And they're like, sure, not a problem. So
yeah,
but yeah,
it's
a gigantic antique mall.
I don't do the whole thing. Whenever we go in, we hit parts of it.
Yeah.
But there are some booths that reliably have antique books.
Yes.
And there's one booth that has a couple of gore books, the same books that have been there for like a year now. And I keep thinking, I don't need to rescue those. They're not something you see that often.
Not as much. You know why though? Because a lot of people keep them.
Right.
They really do.
Yeah.
I mean, they have a particular place in history, especially with Daw books and how much they paid for through Daw books.
Yeah.
You know, and that's something that Donald Wollheim said for a long, long time was he published the Gore novels because it allowed him to pay for C.J. Cherryh and allowed him to pay, it paid the bills so he could do all the other things.
That's how mid-list works.
Yeah. And the Gore novels were just wonderful, wonderful,
campy over the top.
Yeah. You know, He-Man stuff, and I thought they were great fun. So,
yeah, and that's the thing that I'm like, whenever I go book shopping, I have to just kind of be like, bring home all of them.
It's hard. It's so hard.
I get a couple of fairy tale collections this last time. One is Indian folklore, and the other one is it's a South American folklore.
I bet Travis. We have a friend, art history professor Travis, who has a YouTube channel that's insane with all his art history lectures. He has a particular attachment to South American lore and history
and Central American.
He's a little too fascinated with some of it.
Yeah.
So he's such a nice Mormon man. His attachment to Aztec culture is a little scary.
Have you read his novel?
No, I've not read his novel.
His attachment to
he can actually pronounce and spell all those gods.
Yeah,
but he's not wrong in saying that there's a whole area of lore and history and fairy tales that can be mined for new and interesting ideas.
That's why I collect. I mean, I tend not to grab Great Britain centric stuff.
Yeah, because there's so much
the
more.
Celtic and the Norse, and everybody does those. But if there's anything that's outside that, globally, I mean, I've got Turkish. I have a lot of Russian, but that's the first book I ever owned was given to me before I was a year old, and it's Russian fairy tales. So might have been an influence. But yeah, I've been focusing more on the South and Central American because there's a whole thing there that just is really fascinating stuff.
Yeah. I have a book of African fairy tales, which don't read it after dark.
No.
Don't read it on full moon. Weird vibes. I have a book of Korean fairy tales. I have a whole bunch of
it's interesting and different how the different cultures came up with the tales that we all hear, and a lot of them have the similar similar arc.
Yeah.
But wow, how they get there is so different. So
like I mind Minoan stories.
Oh, Minoan clothing. Damn.
For my my Alien Bride series, and like
Mhm.
unless you know what I'm actually doing, like
Yeah.
you're not gonna
Yeah.
see it.
Yeah.
But like the next one, okay, spoiler alert. The next one's gonna have a bunch of Chinese and Korean
Oh, nice. Yeah.
bases in it.
Yeah.
Because it fits with how I'm going with that arc.
Mhm.
And I mean, it's interesting to be able to pull stuff like some of the stuff that I'm teasing. I've got Indian folklore that I've
Mhm.
used in several flash fiction that I need to build more into, and probably I'm going to actually use a whole bunch of Malaysian and Polynesian for one of them too.
Yeah.
Fun.
Yeah. You were talking about Chinese and the traditional dress, and you had talked earlier about seeing a historical thing and knowing what era the historical
Yes.
been set in.
Yeah.
Bernadette Banner does her once
yeah.
a year talking
Yeah.
about, and she
About bad movies.
well, she talks about the historical movies
Yes.
and film of the year, and I've noticed that as she's done this over the last couple of years, she's added experts in different parts of the
Yes.
world.
Uh-huh.
So she's got people that come in and they talk about the Bollywood movies,
Yes.
and she's got a fellow that talks about, and she encourages them, I think, to dress up in their
Yes.
historical, because they don't explain it. They're just dressed up, and
They're
I'm like,
just there, you know.
But the Chinese fellow is fascinating. I love the hat. The hat, it wiggles. It has a life of its own. But she will talk about in particular how they'll get the dress right, but then it's modern hair and makeup.
I know, just drives me insane. So yeah, it's like,
but
no.
What you might want to do is go back and look at what ones hit really well on her ranking scale for China
Yes.
and Korea, because there's some beautiful historical movies available out there that have, oh my gosh, they're gorgeous. Just the little clips that she shows.
Yeah.
And I'm like, because we don't get those necessarily unless we go look for them.
Right. Well, I have a Vicky Rakuten Vicky account, which is K-drama and Mando drama.
Yeah.
So I actually do go and look for those.
Yeah.
Because I love the historical fantasy ones, because some of them they're just so over the top. Like it's art just in how far they'll push.
Well, yeah, and something too that I find that a lot of people miss because we don't have the context for it is how much signaling there is going on in the clothing. We have no context. We have no ability to understand why somebody wearing that color is a big deal when they show up, or why the cut of that jacket or the cut of those pants is so shocking, because we don't live in that space. We don't know.
Well, and culturally, so like China in particular, I just happen to know this one, which is that white is the color of death.
Yes, it is. You don't wear a white wedding dress.
Right.
You wear red.
You wore red.
Yes. Red's lucky.
And red in the Victorian English era, which is where white wedding dresses started to become in, red was, you didn't wear a red dress. Because that said whole other things.
You didn't want to have a red wedding.
So, it's fascinating to learn all of those little cultural signals.
Yeah, it is fun.
Like one of my friends got married, former friends, got married on 8/8 of 2008.
Oh, same date Princess Beatrice was born, 8/8 of 88. So,
and I'm sitting here going, if she was Chinese, her mother would have beat her.
Yeah, because you don't do that.
Like that's just inviting death into the house.
Yeah,
and I'm like, okay, no, that's not okay. Because there were moments where I'm like, I understand this context, and it's very weird, like emotional thing. Like, oh, I should have known when my car broke down on the way to her wedding in a freak accident. There was a freak. She was getting married outside. And there was a freak thunderstorm that made my car flood 2 blocks away from the wedding.
Well, okay then.
Wow.
And I'm like, it was an omen. And looking back at it, I'm like, it was a really obvious omen.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like playing with stuff like that, and I remember in 4th grade we studied Japan as
fun.
part of our what we were learning, for that year. and we did the tea ceremony, and we had someone who came in and explained every step
All of it.
and all
Yeah.
the meanings and what the language of fans
Mhm.
and what it
Mhm.
meant when you to tie the kimonos in different ways.
Yes.
Yes.
And wearing your shawl in a specific it's
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
there's so much rich context
Yeah.
that even if you don't understand that,
Mhm.
you can pull from it.
Yes.
And like the Victorian language of flowers
Yes.
Mhm.
is
It's amazing how
fascinating.
you can send somebody a complete screw you with a
Mhm.
bouquet.
Oh, yeah.
So-
Well, and in another subculture, handkerchief language.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And if you weren't clued into it, you wouldn't have ever known.
Yeah, you'd be standing there going, huh? So it's very interesting. Bridgerton,
Mhm.
when was it Bridgerton or was it the things they blur? Where no, it's Enola, Sherlock's sister Enola's
Okay.
series, where she was learning how to dance, but she was so removed from culture she didn't understand that the aristocrat that was teaching her to dance realized she didn't know anything about fan communication
Mhm.
with the fans,
Mhm.
and she had no clue.
Yeah.
So he showed her a couple of things, and one of it was "I love you," but
Mhm.
also she didn't. She remembered later after she learned something about a signal that had happened in it. It was like, oh yeah, you don't know.
Mhm.
That's also a stratification of culture too.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because the lower classes didn't know any of that.
Mm-mm.
They didn't. They
But
weren't
they
aware.
also had their
They had their own.
codes and languages.
Yes, they do.
Every culture does.
Well, it's amazing, isn't it?
Mhm. And that's why, and it's they talk about code switching
Mhm.
when
Yeah.
you're moving between different cultures and different groups of people.
Mhm.
Like when you talk to the master naturalists versus when you talk to people at
Yes.
a sci-fi convention,
Mhm.
like your language shifts. You're still the same person. You're still talking about a lot of the same things.
Right.
Uh-huh.
But your context for the conversation changes.
Mike
Mhm.
touches on this about how he's a newbie in the writer world, and he walked into our world, and he was terrified, and he'd rather be shot at by terrorists than have to deal with learning all this new stuff. Doesn't know the code,
Right.
Yeah.
and we're like, what? Just go do,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's kind of fun watching that happen.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, I mean, and it's one of the things that I've realized over the years. So I was not military. I was military adjacent enough that I'm more comfortable with that subtext.
Yeah.
Which means that when I landed in the Bane hangout
Yeah.
spaces,
It's all familiar, isn't it?
because Bane shifts very military heavy because of Bane's sending out books to deployed and injured soldiers.
They're very veteran folk.
They're very veteran
military
focused,
friendly.
very veteran
Yeah.
friendly.
Mhm.
Write a lot, publish a lot of military science fiction at the time when there wasn't a lot of other outlets for it, and so I fit right in. It was very comfortable there, and later on realized that it was as much because I grok veteran as
Yeah.
it was science fiction.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
So, but
And-
yeah.
And veteran is a completely
Oh my gosh, yes.
new. Not new. Like I was adjacent enough that I'm like, okay, I recognize some of the signaling, but I have printouts of the different ranks because I
Mhm.
couldn't keep them in my head.
Yeah.
Like it didn't make sense to me. Like I
Yeah.
finally figured out military time.
Mhm. It's just like I always look at the guys and say, "Are we on pace? Use a regular time." It's like,
Whereas I actually, because not only did I was involved with Civil Air Patrol from the time I was 11. My dad
Mhm.
was military from the time I was born.
yeah,
So I got involved with Civil Air Patrol when I was 11. I was in the CAP one way or the other until I was 18. And for me, and then working in labs more recently, they tend to a 24-hour
yeah,
clock.
they do.
So for me, the 24-hour clock is actually my base level, and I have to translate too.
Yeah, I do find it interesting because it's the demanding code switching when you're in a group of veterans. Like when
Yeah.
we went to dinner at MarsCon,
Oh
it was
my
like the
God.
whole end of the table had dropped into military speak and storytelling, and we were like, we are stuck at the end of the table with a bunch of military guys comparing notes. And
Well, and at one point I stood up and I'm like, "You move here. I'm going to sit over
I
here
was
and
at
talk
the
to
point,
them."
I was like, you two guys need to get a room. Because,
They were adorable. I offered to take pictures. They
Yeah,
came down.
but I find it very interesting that they drop into that culture very,
Yeah.
very, very quickly when you have a bunch of them together, and you have to
Mhm.
remind them
Mhm.
that you are not of that culture.
I am
you
a
know,
civilian.
It's like, yeah, I
Mhm.
mean, and point out to them that they have stepped into that world, and which is a very comfortable place,
Right.
you know.
And there's times it's like, I recognize that you need to be with your people because you're in a very uncomfortable place.
Yeah,
But you, by doing that, you are excluding me.
yeah, you're
And I have no problem with you getting
Just
the
get a
comfort that
room.
you need. But also, like, don't force me to be in the middle of it and expect me to keep up.
Yeah.
Like, you either need to explain,
Yes.
or you need to let me be in a different
Yeah,
conversation.
but it's also nice when it's like Jim talks in a lot of TLAs, 3-letter acronyms, about the Navy, but I grew up in the Navy, so a lot of them are really familiar to me because I heard them all the time.
Right.
But I also know I see people glaze over around Jim, and I'm going, Jim, you need to explain that one.
Yeah.
And that means that I forget,
Right.
you know.
And,
So
and when he explains, like, I speak engineer.
yeah,
Because I grew up with that. So I'm like, once he starts explaining that, I'm like, oh, I totally get where
yeah,
you're
we
going.
totally get it.
So I can.
But it is fascinating, isn't it? Watching, you can spot the military guys find each other from across the room. It's like Mike showed up and I went, oh, another military guy. What? It's like, it's just the way you're standing. No. So
I handed him a bottle of Advil and told him to go change his socks.
it's
He just looks at me and goes, oh shit.
Yeah. But isn't that fascinating that we have all of those cues that are so underneath they're in the subconscious. We're not even aware of most of them.
Yeah.
And if you can write to those in your stories, it really matters.
I was just thinking about that because that's what makes the difference between good military science fiction and not so good military science fiction, because there's been MILSIF that I have walled because they did something that was one specific book I walled and will not touch the author again with a 10-foot pole, because he had two characters that were, in theory, on duty, had the watch, and instead were boinking one another while the spaceship was under attack.
Oh, yeah, no. Mm-mm.
And I was like, no, that one's not even. And then they carried on for the rest of the book like nothing had, that they hadn't been in dereliction of duty and should have been court-martialed and shot.
Yeah.
But
it's not okay.
And I'm not even military, so I can only imagine what the military guys thought about that one. But
well, it's people who've never been around it, writing it and not having a clue of why it's not getting any traction. So
but that's the thing is, like, trying to write romances right now. I have been trying to read more romances for the last year to try and get this, and now I'm trying to write them because they have, just like the military stuff has its own language and code, the romance stuff has its own tropes and codes, and so I've got to do those. Whereas my comfort zone actually seems to be more like action adventure-y. Because that keeps coming in there,
right? And you're writing to action adventure, which is there. That's not a problem.
No.
Like you're honestly writing planetary romances in the sense of like the sci-fi pulp planetary romances, in addition to romances. And one of the things that I actually realized breaking it down with Dorothy for a while was that I was forced into becoming comfortable, but becoming aware of the typical female environments. It was not natural to me. It was not a place where I was comfortable, but I was forced into it and forced to learn how to navigate it through a lot of different circumstances. And so I took it with an engineer point of view. And so I managed to break it down so I could notice all the tells. And so, like, because a lot of things that women who are raised into that and are comfortable with that, they pick it up like they're learning language. And a lot of us who are not comfortable with that, who our brains do not work like that, we have to break it down into a way that we understand and then build back up into being able to. So I can notice body language in a con and go, they don't know what they're doing, but I can tell you exactly what their behavior signals. And they don't. I don't think I know they're not doing it on purpose. Because in that kind of environment, you don't do this on purpose.
No, it is fascinating, isn't it? You know, it's just.
Well, and I found out recently that I actually tend to do that more than I thought I did, because for a long time, so being raised outside mainstream culture, coming back into it, I have spent a good chunk of my life feeling a bit like an anthropologist, studying them from the outside. And I know you two are in the same place, but it's like I have gotten to the point now where, after observing and being around someone, I am able to successfully predict what they're going to do in the future.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'm 100% on that, but I did it just recently with a distant family member, someone that I knew. And I told my husband, she's going to do this, this, and this.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple of years later, he came to me and he's like, my mother is very impressed because you successfully predicted that this person was going to do exactly this, this, and this. And I'm like, I don't like being right in that case, but
It's
I do
pattern
wonder.
it was
recognition
easy
behavior.
to see it coming.
Well, yeah, especially if I think all three of us have done that.
Mhm.
We lived outside of what we consider mainstream. I mean,
Yeah.
I went to 13 different grade schools. You want to be an anthropologist, that's a great way to get there.
Yeah.
You know, because you learn the lay of the land really fast. Okay,
Mhm.
who's the big girl in the class, you know, and stuff and figuring out group interactions and trying to figure out what the signals are because you get dropped into it.
Mhm.
I mean, we've all three experienced, oh, I'm an alien dropped into a whole
Yes.
new world. What the hell?
Yes.
You know, what am I doing here?
Mhm.
So I think that informs a lot of how we see the world.
And I've discovered, which is interesting, it may mean that I can't write a lot of romance,
Mhm.
that given the choice, I will almost always pick male point of view.
You know, what's weird is when we were looking at the romance books, the woman who's on the beach with her drink and her fluffy romance book. I have no context for that.
No.
I mean, I went and got my nails and pedicures, and I'm like, I have never been that woman. I don't even know who that is. And I'm like, why would you spend hours doing it? That makes no sense. I could have been reading. It's like, but I don't get I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
And when you go with your girlfriends, you all go to the.
And I know that you tend to write females that are engineers or technical people in some way.
STEM folks, STEM girls.
I tend to write STEM girls or law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm writing a female, that they tend to fall into one of those two sections.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Of they're there, but they're not. They're not quite part of.
They're
Like-
not in female typical roles.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
But they're still very feminine in their roles and what they do.
Yeah.
Because the one I'm writing now, she's a marine biologist. Like,
See?
Right? I mean, you know.
Yeah,
Since
no.
Don't
And
a
mine's got
tentacle Taco
tentacles for
Tuesday.
legs. So
Right. But it's
Yeah.
learning a new language,
Yeah.
and that's I think a big part of. This is I'm learning. I'm using Duolingo because my daughter started learning Welsh
oh Lord.
because her brother's learning Gaelic.
I was going to say, learn Hawaiian so you can have
So
the whole alphabet.
She had to one up him, right?
He's
Because
learning
Gaelic is one thing, Welsh is a whole other
He was doing
thing.
Spanish for school, Latin because he thought it would be fun, and Gaelic because Latin was too easy.
Right.
Which just
We'll beat
I
him
love my
later.
children.
It's fine. It's okay.
If you have the right mind, Latin is actually intuitive.
Oh yeah, right.
Latin is
I
intuitive,
actually
yeah.
understand why he thinks Latin's too easy.
I was taught Latin by somebody who just come off of teaching Greek, so it was very confusing.
Mhm.
So
It would be.
It's like,
So, but I'm and she's messages me and she goes, "Oh, hey, you're learning 4 languages. That's really impressive." And I would go, "Well, I just found you on Duolingo. Okay, add my daughter as a friend." Like, what are you learning? She's like, Welsh. I'm like, why? She's like, it sounded fun. Okay, perfect reason to do anything.
Mhm.
So I'm like, okay, I guess she's challenging me to stuff. I'm like, oh, okay, log in, do 10 minutes of Duolingo today. So I'm going back through and relearning my Spanish, which I'm doing Spanish and French and German and Korean,
Mhm.
and I'm at different levels of each of them and progressing in different. And the thing is, like, the Korean actually is making more sense because I watch so much K-drama, because there's at least some of it where it's the intonation as much as the letters.
Yes. Yes.
And if you don't understand the culture that's behind it, then you don't know
Yeah.
why the intonation is important.
Mhm.
And there's as much body language that you can't get through learning it through Duolingo as there is language.
Yeah.
So I always find it fascinating. Because I don't consider myself, I'm not a linguist. I cannot pick up a language just like that. I know enough French and I know enough Latin that I can derive other languages out of it.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I consider language like a math equation. Like I only needed like 4 math equations and I got through AP physics without actually remembering trigonometry. Because I could not remember trigonometry.
Trigonometry was I did it once. I learned it just before the SAT test and then forgot every single bit of it after. So
But I figured I could derive everything I need to know from 4 equations. If I can remember those 4 basic equations, I could get there. And I learned a trick from one of my dad's classmates, who was very dear friend, ended up being a very dear friend of him for a very long time. When you're going through a test, check the measurements. I don't mean like get out a ruler, but like, okay, is the question in inches? Your answer is going to be in inches. Is the question in centimeters? Do not go looking for gallons.
No.
Like so go through and rule out everything that doesn't
That
match.
makes sense.
Right? Well, he's like, he and my dad took a test once. My dad's like, I don't know what I did. My dad's like, I'm sure I bombed this test. And Bill's like, this was the easiest test I think we've ever taken. He's like, why? He's like, because the only right answer was only one in the right units.
Yeah. Check for units first. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're doing multiple choice, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, multiple choice is easy. It's like,
right?
not that one, not that one.
Well, like, it's one of those things where it's like, if you go and like check for the units, check for your basic assumptions, and then it gives you a clue to whatever you're moving into.
Unless it says in the question, convert to.
Right.
But then there's every time. But
then there's that there, right? But
it's to put all this together.
Right. Sorry.
We have this when you were writing, communication happens in so many different layers. You know, that you can explain something to somebody. Show not tell. It's like, don't use words when you can use visuals. So
which is a challenge when you're doing textual versus when you're doing the whole thing with filmography. And we talked about to costume, and you've got your modern hair and makeup. With text, you don't have those giveaways, which is good, but you also, it's not always easy to put in the details that need to be in there while finding a balance between too little and too much.
Well, your textual clues are going to come from your grammar and your punctuation, because someone who's from the Valley is going to have different inflection to her voice. She's going to talk like this, and you're going to do that by putting question marks at the end of all of her sentences. And it's someone who's from like Louisiana, they're going to have a different drawl, and they're going to have a different kind of cadence to their language. So if you're going to give context clues, you have to study how people talk. It's and that's how you can actually immerse someone into a world so much faster.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I was thinking about, because I was reading a couple of short stories, not any Raconteur Press stories. You guys can breathe. I was reading a couple of short stories recently, and with a more critical eye than just I'm going to enjoy this story. And with one of them, there was some very heavy-handed foreshadowing, and I knew as soon as I read it, I'm like, that's foreshadowing something. I don't know what yet, but that sentence right there is foreshadowing. And that's a little bit too...
It's too obvious.
Too obvious.
Soon she would know the folly of her. It's like,
Well, I mean, okay,
that's like a Warner Brothers cartoon.
It wasn't that bad.
No.
Like, bye, see you soon. That's the last time I would see her.
Yeah, no.
Fuck you.
And I've done. I mean, I have done stuff like that in stories, because there are times where, okay, so here, present tense, past tense in stories. I'm a firm believer it should always be past tense. I don't understand people that write in present tense. I'm like, the heck? What are we? No, but but with past tense, you basically, your character is contemplating something that has already happened.
Yeah.
So if there's a good reason for it, having them do the much later I would realize the significance of it can work. But there's also such thing as just being too heavy-handed.
Yeah.
Well, it's also, it feels lazy to me.
Yeah.
It feels like, like an unfortunate gotcha to the reader. You know?
But here's where it can work. When you're working in a short story with very confined space, and you're trying to convey as much as possible in a short work.
Yes.
Those become, they would be lazy in a novel where you have the time and the space to pull everything out properly. But with the short story, sometimes you have to take those little shortcuts and tricks.
It becomes an emotional beat that,
okay,
exactly. Yeah.
because I keep having people talk about how amazing my world building is and how deep it is. And I'm like, you guys, I am using some, I mean, especially with the Sumair trilogy, I leaned heavily on a lot of tropes because I was trying to write short.
Yeah.
Because I was writing them basically I've been so busy, they got written Tuesdays.
For Tuesday.
To be released Tuesday.
For Tuesday.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting down and I'm writing between 4,000 to 6,000 words in a go. And my hands will only last so long. So I need these things to not be too long. So I am hacking and slashing and chunking in tropes that I know that people will recognize in order to make sure that the story stays to a reasonable length and doesn't kill me.
Or turn it into a novella like Jim's story did.
Well, and there's a time and there's a place for letting the novel just
sometimes
let
go
the reins and let it have its head and go where it wants to go. But that's the point of Taco Tuesdays, was to not do that.
Right, you keep it a very confined spot.
You were training your muses, to show up on time and to deliver in a small space.
Yes.
So, and it's a skill. You can actually train yourself into those skills.
Yes.
Well, and when I talk about it in the Discord, everybody's like, "You can do that." I'm like, "I'm rusty at it.
You practice.
This is practice."
Yeah.
Yeah. Like one of the things you're forcing yourself to do, and this will help with longer works, is you're faking the world building, but you're creating enough of someone starts reading the book, and within the first couple of chapters or the first couple of paragraphs, they are sucked into the world and they are now part of it.
Yeah.
Because you've given enough of the background so that people can build it in their head, and you don't have to add more.
Right.
You've given them the deep, rich experience by.
Let's have a question about that.
Yeah.
From a reader perspective, I love Dorothy Dunnett, but I have to tell you, trying to get into one of her books is like trying to beat down a wall. I mean, but it's compelling enough, like in the first chapter, that you want to. But I have never had to work so hard as I did trying to get into her books.
She's teasing you into wanting to solve a mystery as opposed to
giving
you the
deep dive in.
Deep dive in.
Yeah, but I find that really interesting, which speaks to her skill as an author, because I'm one of those people that if it doesn't get me, if there's not a good hook and I don't feel like it's going anywhere, it's like, forget it. But I was just driven to force myself to drag myself through the first book. And that's what it felt like to me. But it was also like, this is going to be worth it.
Yeah.
And had she not paid it off by making it worth it 8 books later,
I'm not sure I would have stuck around for 8 books. I haven't read any Dorothy
It's her
Dunnett,
Niccolo series, which is the second of her big historical arc series. And her historical research is impeccable. And it was a whole area that I was interested in. And had I read her previous 8-book series, which this was about, I don't think I would have been as interested. But this particular one had to do with a guy who was working in Bruges as a helper in a family company business that did dyeing in the 15th century.
Yeah, cool.
Right. So it had something to keep me in. And it was one of those things that, I mean, I'll just tell anybody who gets into this series right now that it's a huge arc mystery for 8 long, dense, deep, chewy books that you get to the end and realize she told you the solution to the mystery in the first chapter of the first book. And I won't tell you any more than that because, and I was like, and I should have known, but I was so distracted by trying to push my way into it was like trying to get through a hedgerow to get into this book. So
I know as a writer,
I wonder about that.
Yeah.
And it just is, I mean,
I would not deliberately do that. I want my reader to metaphorically walk into the story
and feel welcome and feel in it. Yeah.
Well, and just be drawn into it. Drawing them into it, having a good hook, having the opening be very accessible. I work hard. My writing style is very, very spare.
It is.
So I have to work very hard to put in enough description and details. And I've actually had editors, Jim, come back and be like, you need to describe this character. I have no idea what this character looks like.
Yeah.
And I've sometimes seen that called the white room syndrome, where
Talking heads in the
Yeah.
white room.
Yeah.
Talking Heads in the White Room,
so I
can see
try not to do that. But I also, and once in a blue moon, stylistically, I will choose to go with purple prose.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, if I'm writing sword and sorcery.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's appropriate.
Yeah.
Yeah. And some people can go so far into that, it's really hard to even
Mhm.
get in.
Mhm.
You know, I'm sorry, but the character names you can't pronounce are just,
No.
where you start calling him Steve because it starts with an S. You know, so.
Well, and I did that deliberately with Vulcan's Kittens, going
Mhm.
back to the Central American mythology. I have the jaguar god known as Steve because nobody can pronounce his name.
Cooper.
It's like, Ralph.
So he's like,
It's like,
he's like Steve, and that's what we're gonna call him.
right?
Because,
It's just because I don't know who that is. So,
and I mean, I have Quetzalcoatl in there because I can actually pronounce and spell his name, but Steve is Steve.
Yeah, because you know,
because I looked up the name of the jaguar god and I'm
You're
like,
like,
nope,
yeah,
that's not happening.
no, that'll make your
Especially
spell
not the
check lose
YA
its
novel.
mind. Yes.
Oh my gosh.
But I wonder if the different types of prose are related to how the author's mind works.
Oh yeah,
Because
I would wonder
that's
about that too. Yeah,
because someone who and it's because that's probably how it came out of her brain. She had to pull out every single thread.
it was a very. If I had, I'm sure that her books were incredibly outlined
Mhm.
because their structure was like the most beautiful tapestry weaving. I mean, so many things intertwined and running through. I don't know how she kept it in her head.
Yeah.
I mean, it just, to me, it was the most amazing, rich, flavorful writing with you know, the historical blend and the big story arcs that were going on and stuff.
Yeah.
It was just so rich and so deep, which really appeals to me. But I can only read those every so often.
Right.
I mean,
Well, there's a series by Reese Bowen, which I'll say there's two series of hers. I've only read the first in one, and I've read like 3 or 4 in the other one. And I would not have finished the first one in hers if I hadn't been stuck in a car for 14 hours, and I literally could not change the audiobook for the first 3 hours.
Oh, okay.
Like I would have gotten if I could have changed the audiobook, because I was just, there's massive traffic and construction.
Yeah, you just
I
couldn't.
just could not change it.
Yeah.
If I would have changed it in the first hour, but making it past the first 2 hours, I actually got immersed enough into the story.
You got invested
that I'm like,
into
okay,
what was going on.
And then like her Molly Malone series, there's like 13 books in it, and I've read the first 3 or 4, and I'm like, she's doing the will they won't they with a couple of different characters, and I'm like, I don't like the characters enough to stick with it through the series. The mysteries are good, but like again, it's if I hadn't been stuck in a car being forced to listen to the first few hours, I would not have finished the first book. And having finished the first book, I wanted to finish the second book. And then it's Irish immigrant woman in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Like it's a very period story of a period that I'm familiar with, and she gets enough of the details right, and then she ends up being courted by a Jewish, like Irish Catholic girl, being courted by a
that was not
a Jewish, right? And she's showing like the this is absolutely a culture clash. This is not okay. His parents are not okay with this, but they're both okay because they're both socialists. And that's where I turned the book off.
No, that's not okay. None of that. No.
And I'm like, you know what?
Okay, we're done.
I now have fire starter. I can crumple this up and throw it into the fireplace. Because
we're already starting to run long, but one of the things I'd like to talk to you about, because I feel like we're getting to the point where we have to consider this, is when is a series too long? So that's not a today topic. We can leave it up to the comments.
That was an interesting question that we had. Where was it? It was somewhere.
Yeah,
people were asking about when is the series too long,
right? Because it's something that has to be contemplated. Because there's a point when it's daunting for the reader to go, "There's 13 books in this series. Do I really want to invest that kind of time into
And those of us who
Um,
read Travis McKee,
So, well,
every time,
well,
and
I
we
mean,
on for
it's
what,
like,
50 books.
yeah,
So.
Pam Uphoff's,
Yeah.
Wine of the Gods.
Mhm.
I don't know how many books it's up to now. I
Has
lost
she hit
track.
100 yet? It's close.
It's probably close, but
Wouldn't be surprised.
anyhow, that's a question
It's a
for the
good question.
comments,
Yeah.
and we can revisit
I
that
know
on a
we
different
wandered.
topic.
We started
So-
with tentacle tacos and donuts
Yeah.
and ended up in Dorothy done it as a series too long and rich
Yeah.
and crunchy and
Yeah.
Well, and I will say I will give my quick answer, then we can run into it next week.
Sure.
Of a series is too long when the author is bored with writing it.
yeah, and you can tell.
Yeah.
You can totally tell.
Yeah,
So-
that's one point, and yeah, we
we
need to
actually
This is a
get
good
into that
topic
next
to get
week.
into.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right.
So yet another round of stream of consciousness from the three moms. So and we're also always taking topic suggestions as well.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
So
If you guys have any
Topic suggestions.
topic suggestions, any
any
comments,
people
questions?
you wonder if we could get on as guests.
Absolutely.
Because
Yeah.
we know a lot of
Suggestions
people.
for guests.
So
Mhm.
Mhm.
yeah.
And some of them we'd love to have on. Some of them we probably already we may have already contacted.
Mhm.
Some of them
Some of them we're sneaking up on.
yeah, well, some of them don't know they're going to be contacted.
Which is like, so yes.
Okay.
So
All right,
yeah, thanks for hanging
fantastic.
out with us. We'll see you next Wednesday.
See you next Wednesday.
Bye now.